Yeah, so 2009 is when we started. We There were 12 families that started Refuge together. We were all of us actually in a Sunday school class at another church, and God called me really into this, and I shared the vision with some other people, and from there they began to pray. We all began to pray and pray together, pray individually with our families, and then God led us all here. So that was 2009. So it'll be 10 years this July.
The early days were very exciting, unorganized, but it was a sweet time of trusting the Spirit and just a new adventure for a lot of us.
It's been interesting to watch it grow. It was pretty slow in the beginning, and I think that was the kindness of the Lord toward us as we were planning and putting systems and structures in place. And so it was a slow go in the beginning to really, I think, let us get our sea legs under us. And then God began to bring, I began to pray specifically for, God, we need some people, we need some help, and we need leaders. And God was so gracious in doing that, to bring people that had skill sets that we just didn't have. I didn't have, other people around us didn't have. And so we've really seen a really turn upward in the number of people that have come to Refuge, and it's been really cool to see that happen.
Yeah, I'd say even since I got here in 2015, it's grown a lot since then. I mean, even if obviously when a lot of people say growth, they think about people attending on Sunday mornings. But I'd say even how we've grown as developing leaders, how we've grown as the way that we disciple our small groups, our gospel community groups, and how we've even cared for our leaders. I would say we've grown in all those areas as well, which has been really, really cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We regularly talk about gospel and community and mission, that we aim all of our activities and events and whatever we do, we filter through the lens of the gospel intentionality, building healthy community for the sake of the mission, that is to make disciples. Question?
Yeah, I'll take that one. We love to do expository preaching and teaching, verse by verse teaching and preaching through the text, and so we've been a lot in the New Testament. We preached a lot through the New Testament, so that lends itself to verse by verse teaching. So we think that's very important. We don't get to skip the hard stuff. We don't get to just find the places that we like to preach and the stuff that doesn't cause a whole lot of controversy. So verse by verse teaching and preaching is important for us. We do have planned to get into an Old Testament text in the coming months. So Old Testament teaching doesn't necessarily lend itself to verse by verse teaching, but verses by verses teaching. So we don't like to skip around. So that's really a high value for us when you guys.
I think when you look at what the early church looked like in Acts, that's what you see. You see a lot of behavior like family, they selling their possessions and giving to any who had need, and you see a lot of that in families as well. Like if my sister called me and said she needed help with something, of course I'm going to do what I can to help her, right? And so I would say the same thing we see in the church is that we want to make sure that we're operating like a good, healthy family. So, and we say that intentionally, that it's not, what would your family do? Because we know a lot of people have some kind of not great families, but we know that what would a good, healthy family do? That if there's needs, we're going to fill those needs. If there's conflict, we're going to sit down around a table and talk about it. And if there's a birthday party, we're going to gather around each other and celebrate with one another. And we're going to go, when the Super Bowl or anything we're celebrating together, we're going to get around and hang out together that way. So you see these natural rhythms of family life that we want to make sure that we gather in together with. Just like any, again, good, healthy family would. We don't want church just to be this thing that you do on Sunday, because we don't believe the church is a thing. We believe it's a people. And so we want to make sure that it's not just about Sunday mornings, that's where the church gathers together corporately, but the church exists outside of Sunday. So we want to make sure that we're doing all of those things like a Northern family would together as the church as well.
Yeah, adopting us in, that's what God did. He adopted us as sons and daughters, and so He's the one that makes us family. This is not just language that we created. It's really language that God created, that He adopts us in as sons and daughters. We get to call Him Father. And so that's the really biggest reason that we use that language, is because we see it in the Scripture. I like to call us the island of misfit toys, because it really is. We believe that God takes strangers and makes us friends, and we really don't. That's not just a saying for us. That's something, a reality that happens. Is people that wouldn't necessarily know each other, wouldn't necessarily hang out in the same circles, wouldn't necessarily go to dinner together, invite you into our home. God takes us, and because of Jesus, He adopts us in and makes us family. So we like to try to live like a good, healthy family. That's kind of my view into it. What do you guys think?
We regularly tell new people when they come that we don't take ourselves very serious, but we take the gospel very serious. So we like to have a good time, and we like to celebrate the life that we've been given in Jesus. And so we say that Christians should be the most celebratory people, and so we try to really live that because this gospel is such good news for us.
I'd say even since, because I was the latecomer to this party, right, in 2015, and me and Sam, we had just moved here from out of town, and so we knew that we really wanted the church that we choose to be a part of to be kind of the hub of our friendships and the kind of everything that we do, because we've had that in the past. And so when we came to Refuge, I think since we were looking for that, and the Refuge is already what was that, we saw it very quickly. And honestly, it might have been after one Sunday, we're like, well, this is where we're going to land now. So. Just because it was so easy to find that family, because that's what the culture that you guys have already built, that we got to be part of with that. So I would absolutely say, even from an outsider's perspective, which I can't really call myself that anymore, but at the time, I would absolutely say that was true, even in my experience.
What are GCs?
I guess I'll take that one.
Take that.
Yeah, GC is, we use that term a lot. It just means Gospel Community Group, so GC. And a lot of people come in and ask, do you guys have small groups? And the answer is yes, but GCs, Gospel Community Groups, are so much more than that. So, of course, when a lot of people talk about small groups, what they're thinking of is like a Bible study on some night of the week. And of course, it incorporates that. But just like we were talking about with the family language and talking about the rhythms of life, that's what GCs typically look like. So whether it's gathering around a table and studying the Bible, of course that's a part of it. Sharing a meal together, celebrating birthday parties, or going to a game together, going out to dinner with one another, gathering around people that maybe are hurting and praying over them, or giving resources, giving money, giving food. That's typically what it looks like. So I think whenever we talk about family language at the Refuge, I think it's most tangible in GCs. Would you all agree?
Oh yeah, for sure.
We say that often, that if you're not in a gospel community group, you're missing life at Refuge. We absolutely believe that, and so we want our people to be part of that, because we also believe that gospel community groups are our primary vehicle for discipleship. So it's not the only place you're going to be discipled, but it's probably one of the best places to be discipled, because that's where you're going to be hanging out with people that are probably on your street, probably at least in your town, and you're going to be doing those rhythms of life with each other. And so if I only see someone on a Sunday school morning, it's hard to disciple them the way Jesus discipled his disciples, because you're not spending every day in and out with them. But when you're at someone's house a lot and you see the way they parent their kids and you see the way that they treat their wife, that's where you can really start to speak into people's lives, positively and negatively. That's where that discipleship happens, because that's the way discipleship typically looked with Jesus and his disciples. What would y'all add?
I'd say gospel communities are really where we're able to live like family. We talked about Refuge being family, and we use family language a lot. And gospel community is really just where we can live that out in the everyday things of life.
Mm-hmm.
What are foundations?
So foundations is, so when people come in through the front door and they want to be part of our church, a lot of people ask, do y'all have small groups? How do I get involved in this? And so we have, the 5 Gs is what we call the way to be able to become family at the Refuge Church, and one of those is gospel community groups. And so if you're coming through the front door, say, yep, this is my church, this is where I want to be, I want to be part of a gospel community group, then the first thing we do is, great, well, what you're going to do is go to what's called GC Genesis, which is your first step to becoming part of a gospel community group. And the way I like to describe it is kind of where we practice being at a GC. It's where you're going to see a lot of those rhythms. We're going to get together, we're going to eat together, we're going to go out to dinner together, we're going to open the Word together, those kind of things. And it's actually led by Scott at his house. And do you want to tell us a little bit about Genesis a little bit more before we get into Foundations?
Yeah, sure. GC Genesis is, I love it because I get to see new people as they come into Refuge. I get to come into my home and do those things that Blake talked about. Share a meal, we open the scriptures, we go and have some fun together. And so we get to practice a lot of those rhythms together. And it's an onboarding place that at any time, if you come to Refuge, you can jump in. So new people, if this is their first week at Refuge, they can roll in, or if it's their 10th week at Refuge, they might roll in before they get on into Foundation. So Genesis is that vehicle where we use to find the front door, the open door, to say, hey, how do I get involved? How do I jump into a group of people? How do I meet with people and do those things you talked about? Pray, serve, laugh, cry together, happens in GC Genesis.
And then from there, once they've been practicing for a while, that typically what happens is that group gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes.
And once we feel like that these people have a good understanding of what it feels like to be in a gospel community group, we have this a more structured class called GC Foundations. And that's where we're going to sit down, we're going to go through a curriculum together, and we're going to train people on what it looks like to be disciples in the everyday stuff of life. And so it's a 4-week class where you come in typically on Wednesday nights. We train those people with a little bit more training, and then we send them out into their own gospel community groups. So where they were gathering at Scott's house in Arlington. So for example, we just launched 3 new gospel community groups, one in Bartlett, one in Lakeland, and one in Arlington. So after 4 weeks, they started gathering in their own homes in those respective cities, because we grouped them together based on that geography of where they are. Because if we're trying to train our people to be on mission in their neighborhoods, then it makes sense for the people that we put in a gospel community group as a team of missionaries that they're in the mission that they're serving, because that's where people typically are involved with their neighbors when they're wherever they are anyway. So we want to make sure that's what we do for when we launch them out. So it's a really cool thing. At the end of Foundations, we try to celebrate well with that as a church and come around and commission them out, because we really do believe that we are sending these groups out to be missionaries in their neighborhoods outside of the 4 walls of the Refuge.
That's really, really good. What is it like to be a part of just the whole experience of the Refuge, would you say?
Why are you looking at me? I'd kind of go back to just really enjoying the beauty of the gospel together. And so being family at Refuge is gathering together in corporate worship here on Sundays and in gospel communities. And really, we try to emphasize the importance of gospel community, because we really feel like in order to experience life at the Refuge and family life, that happens in gospel community. So we love our Sundays, we love gathering, and we love singing praises to the King, but really Blake mentioned the discipleship piece, that life on life happens in gospel community, and that's really where you start to experience the true beauty and messiness of family, but it's really good, and it's kind of the iron sharpening iron piece. I like to say that it's not always easy, but it is rewarding for over the long haul, I would say.
Yeah, one of the questions we ask at the end of each service, right as people are leaving, at the end of each of our gatherings, we say, "What are you?" And the answer is, "We're a missionary." And so we say that we go in the power of the Holy Spirit with the good news that Jesus rescues sinners. And so we try to live that way, not just to compartmentalize our Christianity, not just to compartmentalize that to an hour and a half on Sunday, but in the everyday things of life, whether you're playing baseball or whether you're going to school or whether you're going to a restaurant or to Kroger or wherever it is, that you're a missionary in the culture. And so that's what we're trying to teach people to live their lives as people who live sent.
Cool. Any final thoughts to add, Brittany? No? Okay.
I'd say I love this church. I mean, it's cool to sit around, and when we're at a party or at the beach or whatever, and seeing our people and just seeing the love that God has put in my heart for these people is miraculous. It's awesome to be able to feel that. And I'm not sure I've ever felt that at another church. It's not just because I'm one of the elders here. I think God allowed me to be an elder because of the love He put in my heart for these people, and not the other way around. So I think it's been really cool to experience for me on a personal level.
Yeah, I think for me, when God called me into this over 10 years ago now, I had really asked Him to not let us be just the same church that you're going to find in lots of places. That if you're going to call us to do this, if you're going to call us to plant this church, help us to be something different. Help us to reach a different group of people. Help us to reach the lost. Help us to reach people that may be unchurched or de-churched or hate the church or whatever that looks like. Help us to learn to be those people. And I believe He's been faithful in that, to help us to reach people that might never walk into a traditional brick and mortar place. He's given us a way to do that. And the Holy Spirit's been very gracious in just doing that. It's been fun to watch him at work and bringing people and rescuing people and saving people and engaging people in the life of following Jesus.
It's just been really cool to see so many lives changed, and that we've gotten to be a part of it. And really, we like to say we get to go to work with Dad. And so the Spirit has been very gracious to use us in His work, and it's just been amazing to be a part of. I couldn't imagine life elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Awesome.
Oh, mine wasn't working.